Good morning, everybody.
Good
Good morning,
morning.
Wes.
Oh, it's
Morning,
just so
Rabbi.
fabulous to see you. I would love to invite our folks who are on the call who feel comfortable if you would show your beautiful faces so that we could see you, so that we could be speaking to one another like God and Moses, panim el panim. If you're not comfortable, okay, but if you are comfortable, we would love to see your faces. I want to begin by thanking our dear colleague, Caitlin Bellina, who is our fine host this morning. Caitlin, thank you. Let us begin by thanking God for the gift of learning Torah together, and then we'll get right into our material. I think it's at least, Michelle always says a rabbi should write the sermon they need to hear. And I think you could extend that, and a rabbi should teach a class that they need to grapple with. So I will, in a minute, share with you where this class comes from. So let's thank God for the gift of learning Torah together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. So good morning, everybody. And here is the space where this class comes from. As you know, we are approaching Martin Luther King weekend. And as you know, there is no end of problems in our world. Not only COVID, which is the obvious one, and you can't avoid it. Just in the process of driving home from Minyan to my house after Minyan, I was listening to a skier, an Olympic skier, and she was talking about how their entire sport has been transformed by lack of snow and global warming. And the problem with skiing is that you need snow. And the problem with the world is that there is so little snow. And she was talking about, this was this morning, this is on the way home from Minyan. She was talking about how there was a ski event in Croatia where the skiers were skiing down earth, sand, grit, not snow, because there was no snow. And that there's that, there's, at the same time, President Biden is in Georgia today to talk about voting legislation, and that makes officially nobody happy. And there's plenty of people who are on the left protesting because they don't want speeches and empty gestures. They want action. On the right, what's the problem? There's all these issues, and it's Martin Luther King weekend. And so MLK and the prophetic streak would seem to encourage us to pick an issue or two and work on it and act in support of your convictions, whatever your convictions are. Have convictions beyond your own life and act on them. That's Tikkun Olam, that's the Taken Olam B'Malchut Shaddai, that's the Aleinu, that's MLK, etc. On the other hand, and here's the creative tension in this class, and I'll just speak for myself, I'm exhausted from all this and worn down from all this. And I thought after the 2020 election, we had the promise of make America boring again. And I want to make America boring again. And I want to just be able to focus on our own life. And I don't want to be worrying about the world. And I'm exhausted from all this. And very often, the most urgent question for me is, what's the new Netflix series that I can tune into at the end of the day? And in full disclosure, Shira and I have seen so many Netflix series during this pandemic. And we are so starved for any kind of Netflix that we can both watch together. This is a true confession. We are currently in season 3 of Virgin River, which is officially the most insipid show in the history of television. It's just very attractive characters, eye candy characters, and eye candy land in somewhere in Montana with water and trees and green, and he's handsome and she's gorgeous, and it's absolutely insipid. And at the end of the day, I'm not phone banking, and I'm not, reaching out to Congress people about global warming. My wife and I, at the end of the day, are watching Virgin River season 3. That's what it's come to for me. So what I wanted to explore with you today is the intersection between How do we think about whatever your convictions are beyond your own life? How do you think about working on their behalf so that your life is not just about your life, MLK, prophetic tradition, Judaism, versus the reality of our own exhaustion? And what I wanted to start off with, and where I came to this, I mean, I was feeling it, but I needed a text that could focus our conversation. And I found it on Sunday. We had a wonderful Hartman scholar named Lila Kashdan, and she did a whole thing about the ethical issues that arise in connection with the pandemic as we approach year 3. And late in her packet of texts, and she alluded to it, she didn't really talk about it, but it was in there and she alluded to it, was a piece by Oliver Sacks. As he was in his last year of life. He dies in August of 2015. Oliver Sacks is this super smart teacher of neurology at NYU School of Medicine. He's also a scientist. He's also a historian. He's also a naturalist. He's a teacher. He's a writer. He's a speaker. He's just a public intellectual. He's also Jewish. And he kind of discovers and rediscovers the power of Judaism in his last chapter. This is not the point of our class tonight or today, but he wrote a beautiful piece about the Sabbath and lighting Sabbath candles that got published in the Times. So Oliver Sacks is this very bright and very reflective practitioner of his own life. And he gets the word that he is now in the last chapter of his life, that his disease is terminal, that there is no more treatment. And he's going to end up passing from this world in August of 2015. And he writes this piece that Lila Kashdan included in her packet called My Own Life. And I'm going to ask our friend Caitlin, if you'll be kind enough, Caitlin, to screen share page 2 of our handout. And I'm just going to read this, and this will begin our conversation. He's right, and he's going to be dead, 6 months after this. He writes, I feel a sudden clear focus and perspective. There is no time for anything inessential. I must focus on myself, my work, and my friends. I shall no longer look at NewsHour every night. I shall no longer pay any attention to politics or arguments about global warming. This is not indifference, but detachment. I still care deeply about the Middle East, about global warming, about growing inequality, but these are no longer my business. They belong to the future. I rejoice when I meet gifted young people, even the one who biopsied and diagnosed my metastases. I feel the future is in good hands. And Caitlin, if we can come back to full screen. So I wanted to introduce this concept of detachment, to use his words. It's not that he is indifferent by his own testimony. He still cares about all these issues, but it is as if he is tagging the future, right? In the race of life, he tags the future and he says, you've got this. And now I'm going to look inward. So I have a few questions to start off with and would love to invite your reactions. First of all, what do you think about that? What do you think about that? What's your reaction to that when you hear him talk about it? And do you think it makes sense for somebody in Oliver Sacks's shoes? And then I want to extrapolate from that. What if the issue is not your own mortality that you're facing in an imminent way like he is? What if the issue is that your morale is sapped? What if after 2 years, you're just sapped? What if after 2 years, you're just cooked? What if after 2 years you're just stuck? What if after 2 years you're just burnt out? What if after 2 years all you want to do is watch Virgin River season 3 and tune out? Is that, if it's okay if you're dying, is it okay if you're, just burnt out? So that's, and then we're going to look at some Jewish texts as well. But first, let's just talk. I would love to invite, what are some reactions to Oliver Sacks's piece for his own context? Would love to hear any thoughts, comments, questions. And feel free to put it in the chat, and Caitlin will let me know, and I'll see it as well. Annette, please.
Well, I feel like over the years I've done that and didn't have the word for it. When I read his words, I felt like there have been different times in my life that I've actually done that. Sometimes with the sense of preserving myself. And that it was a conscious decision to do that. And the question for me was how long it would go on for, what I needed to do during that detachment period, and how I responded, because sometimes that detachment even had to do with personal relationships, not just the world issues, and how I dealt with the responses, because there were times that, and that especially happened when times when I had to look at, how I was living my life.
So in other words, if I hear you right, Annette, detachment was kind of a strategic move on your part from time to time to kind of renew you, to kind of give yourself some time to renew so that you could get back in the game with fresh energy.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
And how did that work out for you? Was that a strategy that worked for you?
Yeah, because I have gone in and out at times. And I mean, I've had to think about it even now. There's a difference for me between getting some short-term relief from what's going on. Like on Sunday, I said, we have to go to the ocean. We have to. I need to hear the sound of the surf. Now, when we got there, it was so windy, you couldn't hear the sound of the surf at all. But just going made a short-term difference. That's not the same. I'm distinguishing between those two.
Right. And in that, there's other language for what you just talked about and other language for that distinction. One vocabulary one might apply to what you posed in contradistinction from detachment is Shabbat. Right? Shabbat, nobody can work 7 days a week on the problems of the world. So actually the very first chapter in the Torah is about, don't even think about working 7 days a week on the problem of the world. Even God's self takes a day off. You should take a day off. So by all means, take a day off to go hear the ocean currents, etc., the ocean waves. And Shabbat is that pause that's every 7 days that refreshes you for the other 6 days of the week. And to your point, that's different from what from what Oliver Sacks is talking about, which is he's just choosing in this last season of his life to tag the future. He's not going to watch the news. He's not going to argue about politics. There is no Trump. There is no Biden. There is no red. There is no blue. There is no assault on democracy. There is no global warming. I'm just, who's coming for Shabbos dinner? And what should we watch afterwards? And not just for, and that's going to be how he ends his life. So, right. And what you're saying is you've done that from time to time as a strategic renewal idea. So thank you for that. I think John and Dixie would like to say some words. We'd love to hear what you have to say.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we sure can.
Kayla must have unmuted me. Thank you. When I used to work 90 hours every week, we always took sizable vacations. And when I talked to other docs about burnout, I insisted that they take vacations because you really have to vacate in order to look at yourself and to renew. So I'm really saying what Annette said in a slightly different way. It's harder these days with all the social media and everyone has their cell phone and their computers, and but to get away from things so you can figure out where you are in life. I think Oliver Sacks has already done that in this essay. He knows where he is, and he knows pretty much what the future is going to be, just doesn't know exactly when, but soon. And he has decided to, I don't think he's not concerned about global warming or about politics. He just decided that's not where he's going to focus his limited time left. And that makes great sense to me, because as people die anyway, they detach. So I really like the essay. I think also as you get older, which you aren't, Wes, but some of us are, you start to not necessarily not be interested in the larger things, but also not put as much importance on them, and realize, as Sachs says, that there are other people who have followed you, especially if it's gratifying if you've done something to help them, who will take over. And your control span has decreased as you've gotten older, let alone if you're getting ready to die.
So John, so you've shared, thank you, you've shared kind of 3 use cases. So one is kind of the the vacation or the temporary reprieve from the world that Annette talked about. That's a strategic idea of renewing yourself, come back with full energy. The second use case was Oliver Sacks, which is when you're dying and you just say, you know what, I need to look inward and make peace with my life and make peace with my loved ones and tag the future. They'll deal with the world that they're going to inherit. I'm not going to be part of this world anymore. I want to talk about the third use case, which is where many of us on this call are, which is not a vacation. We're not going to Aruba for a week, and not being in Oliver Sacks's shoes as he was in this essay, but in the space of kind of chronic emotional fatigue, chronic sapping of morale, just all the stuff that we all know about, including but not limited to the pandemic, the politics, the horribleness, all that stuff. Throw in global warming, throw in anti-Semitism, throw in. And then my question to you is, what do you think about if you're not on vacation and you're not in your last days, you're just sapped? How do you evaluate detachment in that third use case?
I think you have to have a combination of the two. You have to step back to basically not be despairing all the time, maybe even watch insipid things on Netflix. But you also have to stay focused. What I personally do is I read the newspaper, but I don't read every story to its conclusion. I'm up very much with what's going on. Always get next, except for the popular culture question, I get everything else right on the Times weekly quiz, but I don't go into depth on things that are not, they're going to be taken care of with time, and I'll see what happens next, but I don't spend all my time on that, which I might have spent more time previously. So it's sort of a balancing act, day by day. I don't want to despair. I don't want to get lost in despair. I don't want to get lost in Netflix all day. But I do want something at the end of the day that's going to add some lightness to life.
So what I hear you saying, John, and then we'll take you off the hot seat, is a kind of a balancing. You don't want to spend all your day on Netflix. You don't want to spend all your day toggling between CNN and Fox and pulling your hair out. So you try to stay connected to the world and caring and acting, and you also need some levity to keep going, to renew, and it's a balancing act.
Right.
Okay. Thank you, Jen. Anyone else want to speak to the Oliver Sacks piece before we take a look at some Jewish texts that speak to this? Anyone else want to share? And if you do, oh, okay, Debbie Ginsburg.
Thing is, we've been detached for almost 2 years, and it's so boring and so long. And with the problem is we don't know when it will end. You know, the good weather is still 4 or 5 months away when we can enjoy ourselves outside, maybe eat outside. But we've been detached for too long. And I'm getting very fed up with these Netflix series. We tried even worse than Virgin River.
No, there
Last
is
night-
no worse than Virgin River. I don't mean
Yes,
to
there
interrupt you, but
is.
there is
Emily
no
in
worse than
Paris.
Virgin River.
Emily
The
in
most
Paris, we
insipid.
tried last night. I couldn't stand even 20 minutes into it. It's nice seeing scenes of Paris, great memories there, but the story is so insipid. The acting
Emily in
is
Paris?
horrible.
Yes,
What?
Emily. Oh my God.
Oh, it's worse. I tried Virgin River. Emily in Paris is 10 times worse. And if that's what I have to look forward to after dinner, no thanks.
By the way, Debbie, I just want to say you actually role modeled and embodied an alternative. On Saturday, you were our greeter. You were actually there at 385 Ward Street. There were actually people, there were actually human beings. They're alive, breathing, and they welcomed you and you welcomed them, and we sang together and learned together. So I'm not trying to be a proselytizer, but that feels like a nice alternative. Thank you for
And that was a highlight of my weekend.
well, for us too. Any other takers on this Oliver Sacks column? And then I'm going to look at the Jewish lens. Any speakers? Lynette Politan.
So can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Am I on? Okay, great. So I love this conversation. This is like the best of all, because I see this relating not just to the specific period of time in our lives, but to how what we do or how we live our lives. What tools do we have or do we want to work on to use? Each one of us has difficulties, painful difficulties that we need to detach. I choose to use the word distance ourselves from time to time. And very often, like this pandemic, we don't have control over it. And I think that is so scary for us when we don't have control over, for example, a personality or a concept that we feel is so important and so clear to us. I've worked very hard, and I continue to do work at using the trait of being able to distance myself so that I can maintain a balance, so I can maintain strength, so I can give to the other parts of my life. And yeah, I think it's really a really important tool to have in our tool chest.
Yeah. Thank you, Lynette. So I want, with all that, I want to bring a Jewish lens in. And the Jewish lens is one of the later portions in Deuteronomy, near the end of Moses' life. And because it's read in the summer in August, when a lot of people are not yet dialed back into the synagogue, this is a portion that many of you may not have actually deeply encountered before. So, Caitlin, my friend, I'm going to ask you to put on the screen share page 3 of the handout. Okay, so this is Vayelech. You know, we read this in August. Here we go. Moses went and spoke these things to all Israel. He said to them, I am now 120 years old. I can no longer be active. Moreover, the Lord has said to me, you shall not go across yonder Jordan. Now, in the Hebrew, it says something to me that is more poignant than the translation. Remember, translating is like kissing through a veil. It's evocative of the real thing, but it's not the real thing. So what it actually says is lo uchal od latzeit v'lavo, which literally means I can no longer get out or come in. I can no longer go out or come in. So I think the Hebrew is suggesting a certain gingerness that comes when you just, when you're seated, it's just like, it feels like forever to get up and go. If you're standing, it's a simus to sit. If you're sitting, it's a simus to stand. Oh my God, to get into the car feels like forever. Oh my God, to get out of the car feels like forever. Oh my God, to walk in the weather like today where there's ice and snow, I might as well try to climb Mount Everest, right? I'm no longer nimble. I'm no longer agile. My physicality is just not what it was, dramatically so. My physicality, I'm just not able. Lo uchal od latzeit v'lavo. I can't come and go. I can't get up and sit down. You know what? I just need to sit here. Do you have a quilt? I just want to sit here. That's Moses, okay? And then also Moses, somewhat like Oliver Sacks, he's gotten his diagnosis. You shall not go across yonder Jordan. And then but we're not done. The Lord your God himself will cross over before you, and he himself will wipe out those nations from your path, and you shall dispossess them. Joshua is the one who shall cross before you as the Lord has spoken. So Moses can kind of see the future, like Oliver Sacks sees the future. And just like Oliver Sacks points to and tags the next generation, Moses tags the next generation. Joshua is going to be the one, okay? We're just getting started. Caitlin, will you please turn to page 4? Okay. Then Moses called Joshua and said to him in the sight of all Israel, be strong and resolute, for it is you who shall go with the people into the land that the Lord swore to your fathers to give them, and it is you who shall apportion it to them. Now, here's my question. Caitlin, if you could come back to full screen, thank you. I want to channel my inner Peter Pitzella. Peter Pitzella is the Bible scholar who taught us to look into the places, the interstices, where the Torah doesn't go, which is the inner life of biblical protagonists. Peter Pitzella's, classic is when Abraham is taking Isaac up the mountain to slaughter him, what is Abraham thinking? What is Isaac thinking? The Torah doesn't say. And Peter Pitzella has made his mark in teaching us to think about such questions. So here's my question to do a Peter Pitzella on Moses. Moses is now telling people, 40 years we've been working on this thing together. And I am not going to be able to take you into the promised land. But Joshua will do that. I'm going to be dead. D-E-A, dead. I'm going to be dead. Joshua is going to take you into the land. And then Moses calls Joshua and, literally and metaphorically puts his hands on his shoulders and says, it's you. It's on you. It is on you. Now, here's my question. My Peter Pitzella question. How is Moses feeling at this moment? Is Moses at peace? Or is Moses tormented? Is Moses serene? Or is Moses conflicted? Is Moses feeling whole? Or is Moses feeling broken? I'd love some thoughts on the inner life of Moses in this moment. Paul Kalis, thank you.
I would say that I would say that he is intermittently, let's say, use the word happy, and intermittently very sad, because no matter what decision he makes, one can always think about what the opposite decision would have been. So for us now, there are moments when we say, you know, I'm watching the news. I can't stand watching the news anymore. So I therefore do not watch the news anymore because there's nothing I can do to change it, or nothing substantial. On the other hand, I look to my children and grandchildren who are the future and whose life is going to be affected by what happens over the next few years. So I am intermittently at ease and intermittently worried and confused. And I feel that I used to have a little bit of control, but now I have none.
So Paul Kalis, thank you for that. Can I ask you a follow-up question, sir?
Sure.
Is deep peace possible on planet Earth in this lifetime? Is it possible to be in your 70s, 80s, 90s, and to look at the world as it is, and your world as it is, and your family as it is, and your life as it is, and be in deep peace? Or are all humanoids fated to complexity?
I would say that also fits into the concept of intermittent. There are moments when, I'll just talk about myself, when I'm very, very content. And then there are other moments when I say, what is happening to our planet? What is happening to our families? What is happening to our country? What is happening to our democracy? So again, that's intermittent, and finding those intermittent points when you are at peace is a wonderful thing, and you feel very good at that moment. But then you realize, let's say 10 minutes later, that I still have all those other worries, and I have the worries about my children and grandchildren and their children.
So my dear friend Paul, what I hear you saying, and it's just helpful and clarifying, is that deep peace is not on the menu.
That's right.
Deep and uncomplicated peace is not on the menu. In other words, moments of peace are on the menu. But if you went to the Ribono Shel Olam as your waiter and said, God, good morning, I would love to have the total peace entree. No anxiety about my family or my descendants, my community, the world, our democracy, the planet. I want total peace. Is that on the menu? The answer,
it never has been.
Never has been. Okay.
Never has been.
David,
we human beings, we're like a sine cosine curve. We go up and down. And now it's just worse.
So let me I want to turn to David Kopelman, but I want to invite you to marinate on this question. If the total peace package is not on the menu, if the best we get is toggling between moments of peace and moments of not peace, moments of peace and moments of oi. The question I want to pose, and I'm going to give you the Torah's answer, and you can tell me if the Torah's answer works for you, is what do you do about that? Based on today, January the 11th, 2022, and for all the sentient days and the rest of your life, what is your best response to the nuance and layers that are all of our life? And we'll get to that in a minute, but David Kopelman, I want to come back to you now. My question is, do a Peter Pitzella on Moses's inner life. Moses knows he's not going to cross the River Jordan. Moses knows the people are, and that a man named Joshua is going to take them. How is Moses feeling at this moment?
Well, it seems to me that Moses's inner life is mostly peace. Look what he's accomplished in his lifetime. I mean, he's created a nation of the Israelites. He's moved them from slavery to freedom. He's on the brink of having them establish their own promised land. I mean, he's accomplished so much And now what he's saying is, look, I'm over 100 years old. I've done everything that I've wanted to do. And it's time now to shift pass on the mantle to Joshua and let him do what he can do. We're finite beings. We don't live forever. And I think personally, Moses has a lot to be self-satisfied about and to be peaceful about. Look at all that he's accomplished in his lifetime. And he says, look, it's time for the world to move on without me. So I think it's mostly a world of peace for Moses. That's at least my take on it.
David, thank you. In other words, we know the ground rule of our existence is we're not immortal, we're mortal. And we know that our time is limited. And what I hear you saying is that Moses looks back at his life and says, what have I accomplished? And he sees a good distance traveled, not only for himself, but for his people. He sees impact. He sees progress. He sees the difference that he has made in the world, not only for himself, but for a broader community. And he says, you know what? Nobody gets to live forever. I've done what I could with my time. I'm good. I'm at peace. Is it perfect? It's probably not perfect. Do I wish I could do more? I probably wish I could do more. But all things considered, look what I've done. I'm at peace. I kind of like that read, David. It seems like my internet is frozen. Caitlin, is my internet frozen?
We can still see you. You're good.
Okay, we're good. Okay, can you guys just give me a thumbs up? Did you hear what I just said? Thumbs up? Nobody's able to do a thumbs up, Caitlin. It seems like people are frozen.
I'm seeing everyone with a thumbs up. I believe your screen might be frozen, Wes, but we can still hear you and see you.
You can still hear me. Okay, good. Anyone else want to talk about Moses' inner life? And then we're going to continue to look at some other pieces from this text that could add another dimension. Any other voices on Moses' inner life?
Just in case you can't see them, Wes, John has his hand up.
John, okay, I cannot see anything. My screen is frozen, so Caitlin, okay. I'll appreciate you letting me know. John, if you would go next, please.
Thank you for letting me in, Caitlin. I agree with David, except that since Moses is human, he has to have some minor disappointment that he doesn't get to finish the job, because he's worked at it all his life, and he, I'm sure, would like to go into the promised land. But he also accepts the reality. He can't move forward. He can't move backwards. He's 120 years old. Plus, God's told him he's not going to do it. So I think it's basically he has to come to peace with it. And I believe, as David said, that he is basically at peace with it, despite this little disappointment. He doesn't get to complete the job.
Yeah. John, by the way, for my money, what you just said and this vignette, this reality that Moses does not get to finish the job, I think that's the single most important teaching in all of Judaism. I think it's the single most evocative passage in our entire sacred canon, because there is a 100% certainty that 100% of us will die on the wrong side of the River Jordan. There's a 100% certainty that every one of us will be able to look out at the future and see something we would love to live for, something we would love to be present at, a simcha we would love to dance at, a beloved next descendant that we would love to see grow up, that we can't and won't, and we know it. We know that that 7-year-old is going to become bar mitzvah and we're not going to be there. We know that that 16-year-old is one day going to get married and we're not going to be there. We know that that young couple is going to have children and one day we're not going to be able to hold our great-grandchild. And that literally is the lot of the human condition, what mortality means. And I think Moses role modeling that even Moses dies on the wrong side of the River Jordan is just so important for that reason. Caitlin, if you can please screen share page 5. We're going to do 5, 6, and 7.
All right, 5 is up. I don't know if you can see that, but
you know, I cannot, so I'm going to, is it up for everybody else?
Yes.
Here it is. It's up. Okay. So page 5. So the Lord said to Moses, the time is drawing near for you to die. And now the question is, what is Moses going to do? Like, however he feels, whether you read him as feeling layered and nuanced and toggling between peace and not peace, or whether you feel that he's kind of got a David Kopelman's view of him, that he's basically at peace, whatever it is. Now the question is, what's he going to do with the time he has left? Call Joshua and present yourselves in the tent of meeting that I may instruct him. Moses and Joshua went and presented themselves in the tent of meeting. The Lord appeared in the tent in a pillar of cloud. Please go to page 6, Caitlin. The pillar of cloud having come to rest at the entrance of the tent, the Lord said to Moses, you are soon to lie with your fathers. This people will thereupon go astray after the alien gods in their midst. In the land they're about to enter, they will forsake me and break my covenant that I made with them. My anger will flare up against them. I'll abandon them and hide my countenance. They shall be ready prey, and many evils and troubles shall befall them. So can you imagine? Moses is about to die, and instead of God saying, oh my God, Moses, you've just been amazing. What an impact. God says to Moses, Moses, these people are about to die, and all of your work is going to come to naught. They're going to be in the land, and they're going to screw it up. They are going to screw it up. And this work that you can't finish, that Joshua's going to finish, they're going to be exiled. Okay? Now, so talk about leaving the world with some complexity. Can I have the next page, please, Caitlin? Now, this is what's so powerful. And here's where I really want to double down and leave you with some homework. God then says, therefore, write down this poem and teach it to the people of Israel. Put it in their mouths in order that this poem may be my writing against the people of Israel. And then it goes on to say, that day Moses wrote down this poem and taught it to the Israelites. Vayichtov Moshe et hashira hazot bayom hahu v'lamda et bnei Israel. So Moses, so here's where it just gets so powerful. Moses is told you're going to die. Moses is told he's not going to cross the river Jordan. Moses is told Joshua is going to do it. Moses is told once they do, bad things will happen. And then God says to Moses, don't think you get to watch Virgin River season 3. Don't think you get to watch Emily in Paris. As long as you draw breath, Moses, I need you on your game. And even though death is staring you in the face, write down this poem and teach it. And Moses does that. And the poem, of course, is Ha'azinu, which is going to be the next portion, where Moses writes this poem and preaches it and teaches it. With his last energy, he's writing and preaching and teaching. So, Caitlin, if you can go back down to the full screen, please. In other words, here's what's so powerful. And I want to ask you to square this with Oliver Sacks. Oliver Sacks is dying, and I think we could all understand his impulse, completely legitimate. We would share it. Those of us who are not dying are still detaching, as we've all shared. We're all watching Emily in Paris or Virgin River and throwing up our hands in disgust at how meaningless it is. And what else can we do? And we're detaching, and we don't even have many of us don't even have his good reason. That's detachment. And now here you have the Torah giving us Moses, who's in the same place of life as Oliver Sacks, the end of his days. And there's no Emily in Paris for Moses. And there's no Virgin River season 3 for Moses. Instead, we need new energy. Write a poem, teach the poem, preach the poem, make the case. With your last breath, make the case. So I want to ask you, how does that make you feel? What are your comments, thoughts, and questions about the Torah's prescription here? And how does it square with Oliver Sacks? And how does it square with where you are now? Any takers? Is that Jan raising her hand? Oh, no. Any takers on this question? David Kopelman, please.
It seems that God is so demanding of Moses, so unrelenting. I mean, the man has dedicated his life to creating a new nation and giving them freedom. And yet, as he's dying and he's unable to move, he can't rest in peace. He can't relax. He can't look back on his accomplishments. Instead, he's being whipped, saying, "Mush, mush, you got to do more." It just seems like God is very uncharitable to Moses.
So do you think, okay, let me just engage that with you, David. Can you see an upside to this posture?
Well, I suppose the only upside I can see is that God is inspiring Moses to have meaning to his life up to his last breath, and there is no relaxation or contentment looking back, self-satisfaction.
And how does that sit with you? No, the posture of let's squeeze all the juice out of the orange. If you've got a day, fill it with meaning. What do you think of that posture?
Well, I think from Moses's standpoint, it's a little unfair to Moses. I think he's earned the right to to die in a nice restful peace with some self-satisfaction, but that's not good enough for God. He's got to pull the sled even further, as sick as he is.
So it's a very interesting question. I don't think there's one right answer, but I think this is one universal question. One universal question for no one right answer, which is, are we entitled to a harvest season? I have a friend who is not retired yet, but is thinking of retiring, and he is looking forward to a day when he can spend 90 minutes just reading the paper from cover to cover, and just having a day with children and grandchildren, and just having a day gardening, and just having a day, and just having a day. And that's what many, that's a harvest season where you get to take stock and feel good about. And this posture, I didn't write it, I'm just sharing it with you. This posture from Vayelech, from End of Deuteronomy, has a different orientation, which is no harvest season, get to work. Now, and maybe that's harsh, and maybe that's unforgiving, and maybe that's God and religion on not a good day or not an empathetic day. Or maybe it's saying, geez Louise, you have millennia to rest. You got a few days left, a few weeks left, a few months left. Use the time you've got well. And I don't think there's a right answer to that question, but that is at some point all of our question. Ellen, your hand was up, and then Elise Friedman.
I think that this is life and death. I think that those of us who are parents and grandparents, we will worry and fret at the same time fell about our children and grandchildren and what will be, even as we are dying. And I think that to go back to Oliver Sacks, in addition to this answer, I think all of us need to find some peace. If it's going to the beach and listening to the ocean, or going to shul, or whatever it might be, particularly at such a very stressful time, we need to do that to maintain our strength and ability to cope with all of it. And I think we need to do that for ourselves in the world.
Ellen, as they say, sometimes we need to come apart so that we don't come apart. We need to come apart from all of the source of stress so that we don't just come apart and, break down. And that's very real. That's very real. Elise Friedman.
I've always interpreted these last few things between God and Moses as God saying to Moses, you've done everything that I've told you to do. You've stood up for the people when I threatened them, and you've done the job. But nobody can do everything. You can't keep doing it. You keep doing the job, but you can't expect ever to solve all the problems.
Mm.
And it's just going to keep on going. I know this is human nature, and you've done the job that I've asked you to do, and you won't give up on that, but that's it. And you have to understand that you couldn't have even expected that everything would be right with the world at any point.
In other words, Elise, a sober, honest, reflective posture is that when we leave the world, we know that the world we leave still has unresolved problems. And that is the human condition, from the time of Moses to our own day. And that's both the world and that's our world. It still has problems. We've given it our best. We've given it our all. It's time to release. And in that release is some relief. And the ones we love will carry on.
But I've always thought that the important thing was that even though we know getting everything perfect is not going to happen, it's God's message to us is that we're still supposed to do everything we can to make things right. Even though it's not going to happen, that doesn't mean you give up. That's just the way the world is, and you're supposed to be doing what God wants you to do, even though, in fact, that God doesn't expect that they'll be perfect at any point. He says, how many times? And then the Israelites were lousy for 40 years. And
right. So on that note, I want to end our class with two last texts, which I just love. Page 8, Caitlin, please, is a significant problem, but it gives rise to a significant, beautiful, ongoing piece of spiritual homework. Page 8 of the handout. The Israelites were groaning under the bondage and cried out, and their cry for help from bondage rose up to God. God heard their moaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and God looked upon the Israelites, and God took notice of them. Okay, what this means, and our last text is going to be a piece from the New American Haggadah that expatiates upon this. What this means is that for 430 years, the Israelites were slaves, and somehow God forgot. Oops. They're slaves, and somehow God forgot. And then they cried out. And then verse 24, God remembered, oh, geez Louise, I have a covenantal relationship with the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And oh my God, there they are. Taskmasters are beating them up, and they're building pyramids in the hot sun. And oh my, geez Louise, it's been 430 years. I got to remember those people. And now, okay, what am I going to do? Moses. And then the burning bush thing. Okay. So this text is deeply problematic because it offers us not only the reality of 430 years of slavery, 430 years of injustice, but it offers us a God who forgot. And what causes God to remember is the moaning and groaning of the Israelites. Caitlin, my friend, if you can screen share the last page. So this is from the, if you can go down a little bit so I can see the top of it. There you go. Perfect. Thank you. This is from Jonathan Safran Foer and Nathan Englander's Haggadah. God forgets. A shocking idea. God chose us and then forgot us. Only by wailing did we remind him of our existence. But God's problem is our problem as well. We're masters of forgetting. about prejudice and unfairness, wars and genocides, hunger and misery. We're busy, we're overwhelmed, we're callous. So what reminds us of injustice in the world? Wailing, protest, complaining. Suffering in silence is not a Jewish virtue. Complaining is a Jewish virtue because dissatisfaction is a particularly Jewish characteristic. Sometimes we're dissatisfied by trivial matters, by issues of money and status and luxury. But one of the joys of being Jewish is membership in a group that is eternally dissatisfied with the way things are. We are at our core a messianic people. We dream of a better time when the entire world will make the journey from slavery to freedom. And how will that journey begin? By opening our mouths. So Kaylin, and it goes on, it's quite beautiful. But I want to leave you with this thought that the response of this Haggadah commentary is that the brokenness of the world occasions an obligation as Jews to complain, and we're good at complaining according to this, to be dissatisfied, and then to work on remedying it. And so I want the class to end where it began, to hold two tensions. On the one hand, to hold the tension of that last piece, which is we're descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Moses, and our job is to take note of what is wrong with the world, to protest it, to complain about it, and to work to fix it, on the one hand. And we have a model of Moses, who even in year 120, even when he's been given his death sentence, even when he knows Joshua is going to be leading them across the River Jordan, Moses still spends the last of his energy writing a poem. And John asked what poem. The poem is Ha'azinu, the next portion in Deuteronomy. It's a poem, and Moses writes it with his last energy. He's 120, according to the Bible's testimony. When he writes it, and he teaches it, and he preaches it, and only then does he die. So that the Bible's model is we take this broken world and we spend all of our energy until we have no energy left trying to repair it. That's on the one hand. And on the other hand, the voices of Oliver Sacks and the different interpretations of it, that we can't just do that full on all the time, 24/7. We need a break. We need detachment. We need to come apart so that we don't come apart. And the greater the complexity and the longer the time and the hotter the heat and the more tumultuous the tumult and the more tempestuous the tempest, and the longer this all goes, the greater the danger of coming apart. So therefore, we need to come apart so that we don't come apart. So I want to leave you not with an answer, but kind of like one of the interpretations of Moses with some competing tensions on MLK weekend in about year 3 of the pandemic, which is yes, note, observe, protest, and repair as best you can. You're part of it. And yes, detach so that you have energy, because it's a long and winding road. Thank you guys so much. All the best. See you next week. Bye.